Hi, I'm Laia and this is Scripture Trilogy, and today I will be reviewing A Reaper at the Gates by Sabaa Tahir, the third book in An Ember in the Ashes quartet. An Ember in the Ashes is a YA novel, and to give you the blurb for the first book, Laia is a slave, Elias is a soldier, neither is free. Under the martial empire, defiance is met with death. Those who do not vow their blood and bodies to the emperor risk the execution of their loved ones and the destruction of all they hold dear. Laia lives with her grandparents and older brother. The family ekes out an existence in the empire's impoverished back streets. They do not challenge the empire. They've seen what happens to those who do. But when Laia's brother is arrested for treason, Laia is forced to make a decision. In exchange for help from the rebels who promised to rescue her brother, she will risk her life to spy for them from within the Empire's greatest military academy. There, Laia meets Elias, the school's finest soldier, and secretly its most unwilling. Elias wants only to be free of the tyranny he's been trained to enforce. He and Laia will soon realize that their destinies are intertwined and that their choices will change the fate of the Empire itself. So before I get into the spoily review, I'm going to have a rant about the cover changes, so if you don't want to see that, skip to the timestamp that's down below. So you might have noticed that this is the UK cover of the book, and this here is the American one. And the reason I have this is because I got the first book in the original American cover, which then was changed for the paperback into a cheaper version right here. And the cheaper version looked kind of crappy, but then the second one was also the cheaper version, but looked a little better because the cheaper version of the first one looked like brown gravel. And then the third one, they just completely switched to this one with the characters' faces on it. So they have the first one, the second one, and the third one in that one, and the original covers that sort of went together, there's no more that looked like them. So initially I got the third book with this cover because I didn't really like the ones with the faces on it at first. For example, with this one, I don't like how the mask looks, one, and her hammer isn't even accurate to the book. You see this hammer has a flat side and then like a stabby side. The one here does not. It's just flat on both sides, so it doesn't even fit the book. And I didn't really know that before I got it, but what I did know is the masks don't fit the description, because the mask is supposed to pretty much cover everything but like the bottom of your nose and your mouth, but it's supposed to go like down and around your neck and claw into the back. It's described multiple times as like digging and clawing into the back of the male protagonist's neck, and this is the cover of the second book. That mask does not look accurate. Also, the first one, he looks like a pale ginger. I didn't even realize I was supposed to use mask at first, but that's besides the point. Anyway, though, so I got the third one, the UK one, but then for the fourth one, I decided I don't care, and I just got the American cover for it, which honestly is, they've grown on me a bit. I like them more than I initially did. However, the UK covers are also pretty stunning looking, how it looks like fire and like animals. This one's clearly meant to represent Helene. The only shame is I didn't get a book cover with Helene, who was my favorite point of view. For 2 out of the 3 books, she had a point of view. Every single book I own of this series doesn't match. It's amazing. Anyway, the review for this book will contain spoilers for the first 2 books in this series, so if you don't want to hear them, bye-bye. But if you already read the book or don't mind spoilers, feel free to stay. This is the blurb for A Reaper at the Gates. Beyond the Empire and within it, the threat of war looms even larger. The Blood Shrike, Helene Aquilla, is being assailed from all sides. Emperor Marcus, haunted by his past, grows increasingly unstable, while the Commandant capitalizes on his madness to bolster her power. As Helene searches for a way to hold back the approaching darkness, her sister's life and the lives of all those in the Empire hang in the balance. Far to the east, Laia of Serra knows the fate of the world lies not in the machinations of the martial court, but in stopping the Nightbringer. But while hunting for a way to bring him down, Laia faces unexpected threats from those she hoped would aid her, and is drawn into a battle she never thought she'd have to fight. In the land between the living and the dead, Elias Veturius has given up his freedom to serve as soul catcher, but in doing so, he has vowed himself to an ancient power that will stop at nothing to ensure Elias's devotion, even at the cost of his humanity. Dun dun! In my opinion, this is definitely the best book in the series so far. The first two books are fun and exciting, but this one takes the cake for me. It is the most exciting. This book has the point of views of Laia, Elias, and Helene, like the second one. And they're all doing their own thing. So they're in different locations in the world of this story. And it makes it more exciting in my opinion. Because the first one, Laia and Elias were doing their own things in the same location. So it's a bit more separate. Then the second one, Elias and Laia were kind of together the whole time, and Helene got a point of view doing her own thing. But it was a bit more samey with Laia and Elias's point of views because they were together for most of the book. This one, they're all separate for almost the entire book, which made all of their point of views feel necessary and also gave me a better grasp about the different aspects of the world. And I really enjoyed getting to see the different parts of the world, and also I enjoyed how each character had their own adventure going on instead of one adventure with different point of views of the same thing. And this resulted in each perspective having its own unique storyline, more unique than any of the other storylines in the first two books. So I have 6 main topics within this book I would like to discuss. First, I want to discuss Helene. Now, if you might have noticed, I wore my hair like her, well, a crappy version of how she wears it because I can't braid very well. And I wore blood shrike earrings. Well, they're hawks, but they're supposed to be her blood shrike. So I dressed up like Helene for this video, so I hope you appreciate it. I didn't put a silver mask on though because I did that for one video, and it's not very fun to have tinfoil on your face for a whole video. So, like the second book, Helene was my favorite perspective character. Her and the Commandant were constantly trying to outsmart each other within the political restraints of the world. It was crazy entertaining and intense. And though I personally do enjoy fictional politics, if you don't enjoy that, it's pretty much mainly focused about battles and fighting, so it's not really them just sitting around doing politics. It's very action-packed and adventurous, and it's fun because a lot of times I feel like in books the villain's very detached, but I like the Commandant because she's on the page a lot. And in Helene's perspective, she had the best villain repertoire. They were constantly fighting each other, which made it feel more intense. And though in some of the earlier books, specifically book 1, Helene didn't seem as badass as she was made out to be, given she's the only female mask in her class and is supposed to be the 3rd best in the class, she didn't seem to live up to her label, to at least some people. I can see that. It didn't take away from the book for me, but I get it. This book, that's not the case at all. This is the most badass she's ever been in any of the books so far, and it's pretty intense. She's just been progressively getting more badass throughout the series, and it's great. However, going from Helene's point of view, that sort of segues into my second point, and that is the villains. I think part of the reason why I liked Helene's perspective the most is because she had to constantly navigate the Commandant and Marcus, 2 of the biggest villains in the series. Since book 1, the Commandant has been one of my favorite book villains. And honestly, this might be her best role yet. Book 1 and book 3, I think, are the best Commandant books. With the Commandant and Helene constantly having to outmaneuver each other, I truly got to appreciate how deadly and smart the Commandant is. I also really liked how Marcus was written in this book. In book 1, he was pretty average to me, just the pure bad bully who's also a sociopathic character. Like, nothing really special. Then book 2, he did improve a bit. He sort of proved his intelligence and that he wasn't just dumb and violent. However, in this book, he became both more cruel and terrifying, while also becoming more sympathetic and humanized, while also displaying his extreme competence as an emperor and a warrior, and also his vulnerability from the psychological damage he has gotten from killing his brother. Don't get me wrong, he's still a terrible person, but he's an interesting one, who feels more than just, oh, this is the evil character who does bad things. He's a great example of a complex villain who's still 100% in the role of villain, and I liked what happened with his character in the plot. I think part of the reason why I enjoy the Commandant and Marcus is because they're both extremely competent, and they have to constantly struggle and fight and outmaneuver others in order to gain and retain power. And I've read a lot of books where the antagonist is just incompetent, either because one, the author can't think of a better way to keep the protagonist alive, two, to make the protagonist look cool, or three, which kind of goes with two, to make the antagonist look like an incompetent loser, which isn't really interesting to me. I feel like that's one of those things to be like, ha, you suck, take that. I don't find that interesting in books. I don't like antagonists to exist just to suck. And then in a lot of other books, there are super powerful antagonists who are already at the top of everything. They're secure in their power, and only the protagonist and their team of friends are the only ones going against the antagonist who can defeat the antagonist. And I understand that one a bit more. The incompetent antagonist, I don't really think is that great writing. The two, like the very secure antagonist who has everything they need, I understand that. I understand how it makes it seem like a bigger threat, but it also prevents the antagonist from feeling like a dynamic person or being particularly engaging. They're at the top, they're just doing things, so really they can only go downhill. They can only lose and get worse. But with these characters, specifically the Commandant, she's trying to gain more power. So the characters aren't just trying to stop her, they're trying to prevent her from gaining more power. So every time she gets ahead more, she gains more power, the threat gets bigger, builds the tension. Because it's not just an antagonist sitting there waiting to be defeated, she is an antagonist gaining power and taking everything for herself. And she can, throughout the story, become more and more of a threat. And also, this makes both characters have to constantly be active in the story. They're active players in the plot, not just sitting and waiting to be defeated, which makes the villains much more engaging to me. And specifically with Marcus, the complexity of Helene having to serve Marcus makes it even more tense and makes the world feel even less safe. And honestly, the other thing that makes me really enjoy the Commandant and Marcus is just that they're really present throughout the story. They individually are physically present in a lot of scenes. Mostly in Helene's perspective, which again is probably why hers is my favorite. But in a lot of books, the villain's just in the background. They're not in most scenes or really many scenes at all. So when there's a villain who's right there threatening the protagonist constantly, they're more interesting. I remember them more. They're fun to read about. Now to number 3, Elias's perspective. I'm going to be honest, at first I didn't like Elias's plotline. It came across to me that it was just going to be magical training and that it wouldn't be as like deadly or dark, and it would just be him hanging out with a character and learning his magic skills. I was like, this doesn't really fit this series. I was wrong. I was proven wrong pretty quickly, actually. And I will admit, I didn't necessarily find his story as exciting as the others, but I really loved his character arc. The character arc fit both his past and present, and also was the natural consequences of his actions in book 2. And in my opinion, these consequences needed to happen in this book in order for what happened in book 2 to still feel like it has weight and to prevent this book from cheapening death. Because in book 2, when Elias pretty much died and was brought back to life to be the soul catcher, I was worried it was going to just cheapen the story and be like, oh, a character died, but he's brought back to life, so it's fine, no consequences, he's just alive, and now he works as a magical apprentice. Oh darn, he's magic now. Such bad consequences. But no, like, this book legitimately made it a bad thing. And though, yes, him being alive is still better than him actually just staying dead, it still gave weight to it and made it feel like something that mattered, and it wasn't going to be something that just be, oh, whenever a character dies, magic can save them. No, it's a big part of his character now. Because Elias is soul catcher now. He doesn't just get to have his life again. And this might be a minor spoiler, so spoiler warning until the labor of spoilers go away. But I really like how this book gave Elias a negative character arc. I have not read pretty much any YA books willing to give a protagonist a negative character arc. But I really appreciate this, and I personally think it's necessary in order to give weight to his actions of becoming Soul Catcher, because again, if there were no consequences, it'd be too convenient. And since he pretty much was brought back to life, they have to be massive consequences in order to prevent the books from feeling like, oh, the author just didn't want their character to die. But him being forced to lose his humanity, his identity, and forget everyone he knows and loves in order to perform the duties of Soul Catcher was a massive consequence and gave so much weight to his actions. And I also really appreciate how this is a YA book who just straight up gave one of the main POV characters a negative character arc. Spoilers over. Number 4, let's discuss Laia's perspective. Personally, I found Laia's plotline to be more consistently entertaining than Elias's, but not quite as entertaining as Helene's. Probably because she didn't really have a formidable villain constantly fighting her. However, I will admit, after reading about her story in the first 2 books of her finding her courage, I will probably always enjoy reading her perspective. Her storyline had some of the most memorable and beautiful writing to me, and I loved the use of repetition in her segments. It wasn't throughout the whole book or anything like that, but there's a couple chapters where it was used and then called back to later on, and I appreciated that. And though I will say each perspective kind of reads the same, they don't have distinct voices and the writing's pretty much the same in all of them, I did like reading about her unique thoughts, and I thought thematically her sections were really strong. And overall, I really liked how her character has grown throughout the series. And seeing the perspective of the scholars in this world and what they are going through was so brutal but so well done. And Laia's pain at seeing how they were treated was very visceral, but also memorable and beautifully written. Her pain was tangible. Now, point number 5 is the twist in this book. So this book has a lot of twists, and I'm gonna be frank here, I predicted most of them. However, I will say the ones I predicted weren't painfully obvious in the way where it took away from the book and was annoying. It was just more of like, I guess that, nice. Doesn't affect my opinion. I don't like the story any less. It just, the book, it didn't get me. I wasn't like, oh my goodness. As a reader, not a lot of twists get me. Either I guess them or I just don't think they're that exciting. But it personally doesn't take away from my reading experience if I can guess a twist, as long as it's not annoying. However, there was one twist in this book that had me shocked. This is the most shocked I can ever remember about being about a twist in any book I've ever read. I was like, mind blown. I was yelling at the book. I was like, oh my gosh, like it got me good. I haven't been gotten this good by any twist in years, and I can't remember the last one that really shocked me. I know it's happened like before, but it's been a long time. I did not see this coming, and if you want to discuss the twist further, feel free to ask in the comments and I'll tell you what it was, but I don't really want to discuss it out loud in the video because spoilers. Now for point number 6 is the romance. The only thing about this book series I haven't really gotten into is the romance. In the first 2 books, the main romance was between Laia and Elias, and I'm gonna be honest, they were attracted immediately. They were like, there's a fire in their eyes. We're just instantly into them. And they were both like, oh, they're hot. So it's kind of like, oh, they're like each other because they're both main characters and good looking. And to be honest, Elias and Laia were pretty much insta-love. They just saw each other, saw a fire in their eyes, saw that they were hot, and liked each other. It wasn't obnoxious to the point where they were constantly gushing over each other and it took away from the story, but it kind of killed any chance of me getting really into them as a couple. It wasn't based on specific interactions as much as it was the character's essence, which I need interactions for me to get into a romance. And yes, they have had many of interactions since then and progressed, but since their initial liking each other was way too quick for me, I've never really gotten that into them as a couple. Like, I like both the characters as individuals a lot. I really enjoy them and I want them to be happy, so I want them to be together because I like them as individual characters, but I don't care for the romance. However, to be honest, I feel that way about most book romances, so unless a romance actively annoys me, it's not really that big a deal for me in a book. Me liking a romance is a big deal. Me hating one can really turn me off. But me being like, about one, it's just a subplot. Like, that's not going to make or break a book for me when that's not even the point of the whole book. However, in this book, Helene starts to develop a romance, and she meets that character in the second book. So this romance is very slow burn, and I was getting into it. Like, I was rooting for them. I was like, come on, kiss already, because Helene's like, I can't be with him. I'm like, oh my gosh, girl, you should be with him. So I actually kind of got into Helene's romance in this book, and I don't want to spoil anything, but by the next book, I was still also definitely into it, if not more into it, because the tension and build up was slow burn, just how I like it. Now, not every romance I like is slow burn, but that's the easiest way to make me like it, and this book gave us a slow burn. So I actually prefer the secondary couple over the main couple. Main couple, secondary, yes please. So overall, this book was great. I gave it 5 stars. I really loved it. I will say a lot of reviews I saw liked this book the least because they said it was too depressing. But, like, for me, I'm like, yeah, this is a depressing, messed up world. It should be like this. Like, what are you talking about? It wasn't too depressing. It was super entertaining and exciting. And the depressing stuff should be there. Like, did they want this book to be happy? It's like about a brutal empire. The book 2 had a whole genocide happening during the book. But that one wasn't too depressing, but this one is. Like, what? Like, it can't go back after that. It can't be a happy series after that. So I guess maybe if you're like that mindset and you don't want a book too depressing, this is not for you. But for me personally, if you like the other 2 books, you'll love this one, because this book is definitely the most fast-paced, tense, and high-stake book in the series so far. Anyway, those are my thoughts on this book. Please let me know if you've read it or any of the books in this series, if you plan to, if you don't want to, but you want to discuss what I do or do not like so you can learn from that further in the comments, or discuss anything that I mentioned about villains or romance and what can make you or me like or dislike a villain. Do you disagree or agree with my points of what makes a good villain or romance? Do you have any other pointers you'd like to add for anyone down there? I would love to discuss anything that this video makes you think of, so feel free to comment it down below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.